All right, welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I am extremely excited about because it taps in a little bit to my spiritual woo-woo kind of side, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. So we're going to chat about masculine and feminine energy, and I think this is a topic that's extremely relevant to our audience because a lot of you guys are either big into your weight training, you compete in bodybuilding, you're in a high income earning career, or you run your own business. And a lot of these things that we do, a lot of high achieving females nowadays are participating in a lot of masculine energy habits and roles. And basically, when it comes to masculine and feminine energy, we all have both inside of us. And it's really important to be able to kind of like flow and chop and change between both of them. We do need both elements. But I think a lot of women get stuck in that masculine energy because of the lives that we lead nowadays. And it's really important that you do bring yourself back into that feminine side to help balance that out. Otherwise, we end up imbalanced, essentially, energetically. So I'm really excited to talk through this. And I think, Loz and I are going to have a lot of differing opinions to share with you guys. But first of all, haven't seen you for a little while, Loz. How's your week been?
Hello. Week has been good. I'm actually glad that we do this podcast just for our friendship, to be honest, because at least I have like something booked in with you once a week. Week's been good. I've been house sitting, so I've been staying up in Reedy Creek, just like working out of there. I'm looking after 2 dogs and they're still alive, which is great.
Loz hates dogs.
No,
guys.
I don't hate dogs.
Red flag.
I just normally hate's the wrong word. I have a neutral opinion about small fluffy dogs. That's all. But these are actually small and I like them. They're nice. And what else have I been doing? Yeah, work's been good with my full-time role. That's keeping me nice and busy. I'm heading to Melbourne today. We're doing a women's workshop for STC on Saturday, which will have passed by the time that this is out, but that's what I'm up to. I'm really excited about that because that is almost like a passion idea of mine where I had a lot of conversations with women, whether just like friends or clients or whoever, where they're going through that like transitionary period of, you know, where do I find my new kind of group of friends, or maybe my current group of friends are making fun of me for wanting to get better and stuff. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could just, you know, put something together and bring a bunch of them into the same room and meet each other, you know, push your comfort zone. We're going to train, we're going to do like some mindset stuff. And Amy, one of the other mindset coaches at STC, is doing a group hypnotherapy session.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I've never witnessed that before. So yeah, lots going on. I am going to have a little bit of a break like over Christmas and stuff, but just kind of bring it down from like 100% to 50% and do more of those like work tasks that are perhaps more creative and less like deadline driven and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, how are things with you?
Yeah, really good. It's been busy for me as well. I feel like there's a lot going on work-wise towards the end of the year. I've mentioned on here before that I'm working with a business consultant, kind of relaunching a lot of things for next year to really like add value for our clients. So making a lot of progress with that, like new websites nearly ready to relaunch, working on a new app, integrating both of those things. So there's a lot going on there. I did go away over the weekend. So I went away hiking and camping, which was so nice to get out in nature and just like really switch off for a couple of days. It's been a big year. And, you know, a lot of the weekends that have just been gone have been filled with comps and things like that. So it was really nice to have a weekend pretty much off the grid. And I think it's good for me to book in things like that so that during the week I make sure I get everything done Monday to Friday because I'm in such a habit of like, I'll just work like the first part of Saturday.
Yeah.
And like, I don't mind doing that. I'm so used to working like at least 6-day weeks, but I forget that, you know, majority of people work a 5-day week and have a 2-day weekend.
What that's like.
Yeah, and it's powerful switching off for 2 whole days. So yeah, I think it's something I should challenge myself to do a little bit more because it's really good for my mental health and just like refreshing myself for the week ahead. So that was awesome. And yeah, that's basically all that's been going on this week.
Yeah, I think that too, like the having something booked in as well, like to switch off is important because I
Yeah.
know that sometimes it's so easy to be like, yeah, I'm going to take the whole weekend off. And if you're in your house and your laptop's over there, you're like, no, I'll just like, and it's easier to like delay those tasks throughout the week. But if you're actually like going somewhere with like no internet reception or anything like that.
Yeah. And being out in nature is so good for your mental health too. I think people underestimate the power of that.
Yeah, well, even staying in like Reedy Creek at the moment, it's like a lot more green than like
Yeah.
Broad Beach, and even just like because back in Melbourne, I lived in Belgrave, which is like in the Yarra Ranges, like
Yeah.
very leafy. So I'm like quite used to that. Maybe got like a little bit accustomed to it, and being out in the area I'm in at the moment, I was like, oh, it is kind of like has a similar effect to like the beach and stuff, but I think it's like the color green actually like has an effect on your like nervous system.
Yeah, I think it's meant to be a calming color. A lot of like holistic wellness brands will use green for that reason.
Yeah, one of my favorite facts ever, and we'll jump into the topic in a second, but it's like, and I'm going to butcher this study, but it was like looking at a bunch of office workers and their stress levels, and all they did was put a picture of a plant in the office.
Oh, wow.
A picture, not even a real plant, sorry, and it reduced their stress levels.
Interesting.
Crazy. Anyway,
Yeah.
how would you like to start today? I feel like this is a topic that, you know what, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think, how do you understand masculine energy versus feminine energy?
So I think the way to best describe it, like I mentioned in the intro, we all have masculine and feminine energy within us, men and women, everyone. So basically, masculine energy is essentially leadership, ambition, drive, structure, rigidity. It's a very powerful, structured kind of energy. So that's why it's something that really shows up a lot if you are running a business or you're doing a lot of like weight training. Aggression is in there too, obviously, like healthy aggression, which comes into weight training. Competition prep, it's extremely structured, extremely rigid. So that's why a lot of those activities are quite masculine energy driven. Anything in leadership, basically. Whereas on the flip side, feminine energy is very soft, gentle, submissive in a good way. Basically, gentle, flowing, spontaneous, free. So it's quite the opposite. They're essentially polar opposites, basically. And so what we just need to kind of understand is, I guess, both are important, and it's important to spend time in both of them. But you don't want to get imbalanced by spending too much time in one. And another concept I think we want to talk about today is that they actually attract each other. So if you've got in like a dating situation, a woman showing up in a very strong masculine energy, trying to attract a man who's got really healthy masculine energy, like that doesn't work because they repel each other. So you need to be able to like shift between both depending on what role you're showing up in your life, whether it's in your work or in dating. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, cool. I'm glad you mentioned the like the repelling, that not kind of like working. Because I will say, like, on this topic, I may not be as well. I don't think I've like researched it as heavily, perhaps, as you have. But then I am probably in a similar situation to maybe a lot of our listeners who are kind of like, I just have my experience of my understanding of what those words are. And also, how I feel that the societal message, like, this is actually a topic that I internally struggle with due to the reasons that you said, in terms of like, I do a lot of what is described as masculine things, right? So it's like I train, I work a quite successful job. I'm now doing a business, and I've always been that leader, pretty much in just like any sort of element of my life. Like I'm quite similar to my dad. I find myself in, if I'm in a group of friends, even like I remember even, and I don't mean to make this about me, but I've got a point to it. Like even as a teenager, I always felt like I was like a protector of my friends, if we went out to a nightclub or whatever. And I always thought that was like quite a good thing about me. I liked those traits. And then I guess like with this rise of, I didn't even know what fucking masculine and feminine was when I was like 18, 19. but I feel like it's more widely spoken about now. And the messaging that I received, or like the way that I interpreted it, right, was the way that you are is not desirable to the person that you want to attract. And that really, like, it's a sore spot for me, because I kind of, in my brain, I'm like, yeah, the way that you are is wrong. And if you want to attract the person that you want, which is someone who is strong and someone who can support me and like all of those things, you need to be different than you are.
Yeah, so I think it's not that you need to be different from what you are if you are a woman that does show up in a lot of masculine energy based on what you do and your hobbies and things like that. There's nothing wrong about what you are, and you don't need to change that. And I think the important thing to recognize is that can still be you when you go to work and when you train. And I 100% embody masculine energy most of my day in terms of those elements of my life. And this is something I've worked on a lot over the last like 3-ish years, because I recognized that, first of all, if you're imbalanced in your masculine and feminine, it's causing imbalance within yourself. So it's kind of like the same as yin and yang. You know how yin and yang is like
I
a
understand
balance?
the concept, yeah.
Yeah, so yang is essentially masculine energy and yin is feminine. So it's exactly the same thing, where if you have too much of one, it causes imbalance. And if you go deep into like Chinese medicine and stuff, this can actually cause like health issues as well. But we won't go down that road today because that's a bit too far. But it literally can cause health issues within your body as well. So that's why, firstly, it's really important that even if you are, you know, showing up in a lot of those masculine energy things, that's fine. But make sure you dedicate some time to do the feminine energy things, like the flowing things, like getting out in nature, like reading a book, having a bath, swimming in the ocean, the things that are more free-spirited, I suppose, to kind of break out and balance out that rigidity of masculine energy things. But I also think it's really important to talk about the part where, Loz, you said, I feel like that's wrong for me to be masculine and that's not going to attract the kind of partner that I want. And the dating conversation is a really interesting one. And that's probably what I worked a lot on over the last few years, because I do think if, as a woman, you're coming into a dating atmosphere in masculine energy all the time and you're not able to step into just a feminine zone in the dating world, then you're more likely to attract the toxic masculinity in a man, because you're already putting out like a lot of, you know, masculine energy in your interactions with men. So therefore, in order to, I guess, balance that out, you seek that really toxic masculinity, which is actually like that aggressive, controlling, like it's not a positive masculine. Like a positive, healthy masculine man will take the lead. He'll be the provider, the protector, like those sorts of nice things. Like he will just take the lead and be in control, but not in a controlling, aggressive way. And I think it's important as a woman who spends a lot of time in her masculine, when it comes to a dating context, trying to switch off your need for control and for taking the lead. And that's why I think dating in comp prep, for example, is really hard, because you literally can't let the man take the lead, because he'll be like, oh, do you want to go out for dinner? Well, maybe, but I can only eat X, Y, and Z. Or like, actually, no, I can't have dinner. I can't drink. So can we do this instead? Which, yes, it's okay to stand up for like what you want to do and what you need to do, but you are kind of taking away that like lead element from the masculine energy. So I think it's not that you have to change who you are, and that's like such an important conversation. Like, be that person at work, be that person in the gym, but just keep in mind how you can flow into your more feminine side when you're entering other elements of your life, like dating.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is also an area of myself that I have tried to work on. I think with the, you know, like the dating and comp prep, it's like I probably run into a similar barrier just with my schedule. Like, oh, you know, like if I'm talking to someone, like, oh, do you want to catch up later? I'd be like, I'm going to the airport. like that kind of thing. So that is probably something for me to continue trying to navigate. And I think you and I have spoken about it. Like, I probably just don't have that much time currently to date. If something comes along, that would be great. But because I'm in such a structure that I can't kind of like do that. I think with the thing that I struggle with in terms of like leaning into feminine side with like dating and all of that is I'm like, I understand that like that you've got to let them, take the lead a little bit and like allow them to support you and blah, blah, blah. But I will let someone do that once I know them. You know what I mean? And I think that the messaging as I have gotten in the past as well, it's like, well, you've got to let them like, lead or like support you or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I've been supporting myself for the better part of 3 years. Like, it's going to take more than a few dates, not to say that it won't happen and not to say that I'm not open to it and that kind of thing. But like for me to say, I don't know, like even like asking for help and like all of those sorts of things, I know that they're all areas that I need to work on. But I'm kind of like, it takes a little bit to earn my submission, I would say.
Yeah, I think submission is probably a further down the line thing, but submission shows up in the early stages simply by letting them decide where you're going and decide like what you're doing and opening a car door for you and paying for dinner. Like that is submission. And I think that isn't something that needs to be earned from the get-go.
No, I actually do all of that. I hate making decisions.
So like that's all it takes and I obviously don't know what you're actually like in a dating setting. But that's basically what it comes down to is like just kind of relinquishing need for control over that like initial situation and, showing up in a way where you are just like they call it the divine feminine, which sounds a little bit wanky, I think, but
you call it what it is.
Yeah. Showing up in your divine feminine energy, which is basically just being, that free, happy, independent, like flowing spirit is basically like what you want to show up in to attract something that's healthy and masculine. And it doesn't mean neglecting all those parts of yourself. It just means allowing yourself to let someone else take control and take the lead for you.
Yeah. I think what's interesting as well is it's like sometimes those other parts, to me or to whoever, take a little bit of, getting to know the person. And I've had quite a few people be like, oh, I didn't even know you had this kind of side to you. And I think maybe something that I get scared of is that like because so much of my outward signal is perhaps masculine and you don't get to see, the softer feminine sides unless you kind of push past, but like unless you enter my world and get to know me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and especially I think from knowing you myself, I've definitely seen you in that feminine zone for sure. But I think that's the thing. We can get so stuck in the masculine energy. It's really hard to kind of switch between. And I think, the hesitancy and lack of willingness to try and switch, especially in like a dating context, comes down to a little bit of toxic masculinity in women because we get so stuck there and we're like, I'm independent. I don't need someone to support me. Like I don't need a man. Like that's actually toxic masculinity. Like independence is fantastic. And like, honestly, I don't need someone to support me either, but I've learned to like let men pay for things even if I can afford them myself, like because they want to, like that's their role. Like they want to provide and they want to protect. And like it's okay to allow someone to do those things, even though you can do it for yourself. And it's fantastic to be independent, but it's also okay to let somebody else like provide for you as well.
Yeah, I've never gone down that route of like I don't need a man or like any of that kind of stuff. I'm very big on saying that, like I'm working quite hard to not need one. That's not the reason, but like I value choice And I would never want to be in a situation where I had to say perhaps like stay in a relationship because I was financially dependent.
Oh, 100%. And that comes down to also like being happy alone
Yeah.
before you can be happy in a relationship. Like that's a completely different
Yeah.
conversation.
But just
yeah.
like on that kind of line of thought is I will always say, yeah, like I don't like need a partner, but I would really like one.
Yeah.
And like that's okay. And I'm not falling apart on my own. I'm not, I'm very honestly happy.
Mm.
But that's not, I think girls can get stuck, and I probably did a little bit too. You feel like if you admit that you want it, that you're saying that something is missing. And so I would never want to admit it to myself, to be like, oh, like it would be really nice to like, yeah, I work alone a lot. Like, and it would be nice to like have someone support me in that, or, even build something together, or, whatever it is. I would love that. Does that mean that my current life is, cloudy because of it? It's like, no, but what I'm trying to say is like, I would never say like, oh, I don't need a man, I just want to be independent or that kind of thing, because that's not true. I don't want to continue to be alone, and I'm not alone, but like, driven to be independent forever, and I'm going to do it all on my own and blah, blah, blah. That's half the reason I joined STC, is because I was like, hey, this is cool, like, doing stuff with other people. But yeah, I just wanted to like make that point in that like you can want it without needing it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really healthy mindset, and that's kind of the attitude everyone should have who is looking for a relationship, right? Like you don't want to feel like you need it, but it's okay to want that in your life. I think when I talk about like toxic masculinity in women, it's more so showing up and being like, I don't need no man, or
And they're out there.
Yeah, or I've seen a few people on social media be like, oh, I broke up with my boyfriend because he's not masculine enough. It's like, well, obviously without knowing too much detail. And there are probably men who are too stuck in their feminine energy as well and need to work on that. But is that actually they're not masculine enough, or is it that you're so in your masculine energy and you haven't actually identified that there's some work that you need to do coming into your feminine side a little bit more? And that is 100% a narrative I used to run with like a few years ago. And I would be like, oh, maybe this person's just not masculine enough. And I didn't realize that it was so hard for me to like switch over from being in my masculine energy all day long at work to then going into like my feminine energy at home. So I think it's a skill that needs to be learned. But the first step, like anything, is awareness, right? So this podcast is just, I guess, about making women who are in their masculine energy a lot aware of the fact that, you can have both. And, switching between both is really important, not just for your internal health, but also in attracting the right kind of partner setting as well.
Yeah, I think as well, just like a point is that like exploring that kind of like side of yourself is your exploration. Like I think I used to get turned off because I thought like, if I was going to go explore my feminine energy, or however you want to put it, I had to like dance around in the kitchen, or like, light a bunch of candles and like have a bubble bath. And I was like, none of that stuff really sounds like me. And it wasn't. But that doesn't mean that I don't have like my own version of it. So it's like, yeah, I really like, like swimming and, going out in nature. I love, like writing stories and things like that. Singing, like I love to sing, like all of that kind of stuff. So I think, especially with Instagram, there can always be this like illustrated version of what the thing is. And it's like, that doesn't necessarily have to be what it is for you. It can just be, it's like find out if you have like other sides to you that perhaps you've just never really, listened to.
Yeah, 100%. And it can be different for everyone. It doesn't mean you need to go and do something that you don't enjoy doing, like Loz just said. And, getting your eyelashes done doesn't mean like that's a feminine activity that you
Oh,
need to do. You
no.
know, there's
It's not. You just lie there
Loz,
on your back for 2 hours with your eyes shut.
Loz has just given up on her eyelash extensions.
I'm
So
actually so happy with the decision now.
good, they look great.
I have had
love
so
it.
many compliments just on like my general freshness of my face.
Yeah.
And I also saved myself like 2 hours a fortnight of not just lying there in non-productive time.
And money, I'm sure. It can't be cheap.
yeah, I'm sure I've spent it elsewhere, but
Anyway,
yeah.
back to the feminine energy activities. So, yeah, I mean, it can be a bubble bath and candles if that's what you like,
Yeah.
but it can be as simple as like a walk in nature, reading a book, and, you know, saunas, like anything that's like a slowing down, grounding. Creative activities are great. So, Loz mentioned singing. I can't sing to save my life, but I love writing. So writing and reading is a big one for me, and being in nature, like being in the ocean. Like ocean is massive in terms of feminine energy. So is any sort of nature. So that's how I try to spend more time in my feminine, like making sure I make some sort of time for an activity like that every day, even if it's just reading my book for literally 10 minutes before bed. Like that's enough for me to just switch that side, that masculine energy off. There was, I think when I was going through learning a lot about this, I remember reading something about, you know, if you struggle to get into your feminine energy before like a date or something, to do something like the dance and sing
Yeah, I
around the
have
kitchen.
heard that. Yeah.
Which it's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea, and to be honest, it's so funny. When I was house sitting, I had music on the other day, and I literally did start dancing. And I was like, "Hey, there's something to this."
It feels good,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
I was like, I've given it a lot of internal shit, and then I was like, "Hey, this is kind of nice."
It is actually so nice. And
Yeah.
I do it, especially if I feel like really tense.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably because I've been running like a masculine stressed energy trying to get like heaps of work stuff done. Then I'll be like, all right, it's time to put a jam on and dance around the kitchen. And I'm glad no one sees that. But
I want you to go live. Just be like, this is what, that could be such a good like hook for our next step. Being like,
Yeah.
this is what our next step's going to be. Something that has actually just popped into my mind that kind of helps me a little bit. If you're kind of wondering like, well, what are the feminine energy activities for me, right? I like to think of like what I liked to do as a kid.
yes.
Like before, you know, the 12-hour work days. And it's just like, because really, from my understanding, a lot of femininity is play.
Yeah.
So it's like if you can think back to what lit you up as a kid before all of the responsibilities and things, and see if you can still incorporate that somehow. Because I've always been like a reader and a writer and that kind of thing. And I used to do really well in English at school, and you used to have the choice of like being able to write like an essay or a story. And I would just like rock up, and I just had the ability to create stories like off the top of my head. And I used to love that. Like and like poetry and all of that. Like, and I had kind of forgotten that I did that until I started to, think back and then like do it a little bit. And I love, like creating stories that have like a symbolical kind of meaning. And that's my version of creativity. I can't draw for shit, but I can like write a story. So it's like just starting to think about, what are some of your strengths? What did you like doing as a kid? You know, think back to school, that kind of thing. Because we forget that these are elements of our personality.
Yeah, and we just stop making time for them.
Yeah.
As well. And that's, I mean, being in touch with your inner child is like a whole nother story, I suppose. But yeah, that does come into it, and being able to step into that play zone in itself and stay in touch with your inner child is so important for stress management also.
Yeah. Do you remember what you liked doing as a kid?
I loved English and reading and writing as well.
That's
Like
why we
I
get
was
along.
always like writing letters to the fairies in the garden.
Yeah.
That was like definitely a hobby. And being outside, like wheelbarrow rides, Dad would wheelbarrow me around the backyard. We would go camping, like heaps of like outdoorsy stuff. Like I was always playing outside when I was a kid. So yeah, I guess that still shows up in that kind of way for me largely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I love hearing about like how other people kind of grew up and just what like makes them as well. And a big part of sometimes some of the work that I do with clients when they're like, oh, like I don't really know who I am, which is a very common struggle that a lot of young adults go through. It is this question of like, what did you like to do, as a kid? And it's kind of like whenever I think back to, like memories and things like that, I almost feel like more like myself because I feel like I understand, a version of myself a little bit better. But anyway, I think that like those sorts of like activities, that helped me to think about what they were for me rather than trying to just take other people's activities.
Yeah, and that's a really organic way of doing it. I like that because, like you said before, if you don't want to sit there and have a bubble bath with candles, like you don't need to. That's not what it's about. But yeah, I think the underlying message that kind of wraps it up really well in terms of what we're trying to get to in this episode is like, we lose touch with that and we don't make time for that as busy working women who train. And so it's not about changing who you are, and what you are isn't wrong. But just remember, like, you always have room to grow and understand yourself better. Like, I don't think our journey of self-awareness stops until we die. Like, literally, you're going to be learning about yourself for your entire life. So this episode is really just about trying to understand like where you perhaps may be getting stuck in that masculine energy space and how that may be letting you down, whether it's in terms of your own stress levels, your physical health, your dating life, whatever it is, your current relationships. I think it's really important to understand that you don't need to change, but just be open to how you can maybe spend some more time in whichever of those polarities it is that you are missing.
Yeah. Really well put. I think, to finish off the episode, because I think that my experience will be quite similar to maybe your own as well, but then like a lot of our listeners who are in our space, right? And I understand, that it can feel quite like, I've struggled with it a lot. So like you're not alone if you have. You don't necessarily need to repel it just because you think that like you do need to change or that you're being told that you need to change and that kind of thing. You can find what your version of it is. Like it's not necessarily that you have to go and find a bunch of who you would call like feminine, super feminine women and try and like embody them or like act like them. It's actually can be quite a fun experience when you lean into it from that like self-curiosity point of view. And just know that, you don't have to go completely the other way. It's not like, all right, I'm going to like quit my job and live on the beach and just let everyone kind of tell me what to do. It's like, no, that's not it. And in a dating context, I think I'm in a really good place with it. It is still probably an insecurity of mine if someone were to make a comment about it. But that's like my own kind of issue and I'm like well aware of it. But it's just kind of like being open to it and knowing who I am really helps me to kind of like just feel like more sure of my decisions in that space and not feel like I have to try and be a certain way to attract the kind of person that I want. I know that me being me, perhaps with just some like slight pullbacks, like I think you and I have spoken about it before just quickly, where if we're like messaging someone and I'm like, oh, I've got a busy schedule. I just want to be like, hey, can we go and get coffee at 2 p.m, blah, blah, blah. It's just like doing things like just not doing that and making those like slight alterations, not actually like alterations to my whole personality.
Yeah, it's like we said, it's not about changing you. Yeah. It's just about like learning how to balance that out with other elements of you that actually exist, but you just haven't properly tapped into them yet. And I think that's the underlying like takeaway from this episode. Yeah,
they're in there. You don't have to create them.
Yeah. 100%. Just get in touch with them.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you guys. If you enjoyed this episode or if you have like your own experience, internal struggles with these, with masculine and feminine energy, please let us know. We'd love to hear your stories. Share with a friend if you've got people in your close circle who, maybe this has been a topic at the brunch table. And we'll be back next week.
See you next week, guys.